A father's quest to uncover the truth behind his daughter's enigmatic death plunges him into the very depths of hell itself. This journey reveals dark and hidden secrets nestled within the heart of the Vatican. On the night my daughter died, she called me 3 times. I was tied up in a meeting about quarterly budgets and let the calls go to voicemail. The first message was normal. Sophie invited me to dinner, maybe to see that new movie she'd been excited about. Her voice was lively, full of excitement. I promised myself to call her back after the meeting. An hour later, her second message came. This time, her tone had shifted. Fear crept in her voice as she told me she'd found something at work, something she wasn't supposed to see. Sophie worked as a research assistant in the Vatican's secret archives, handling documents untouched for centuries. She said she needed someone she trusted. The final message was just heavy, panicked breathing, lasting 37 seconds before the line went dead. By the time I left my meeting and listened to her voicemails, Sophie was gone. She had died in a car accident on Via de Cappuccini, less than a mile from Vatican. The night Sophie died, everything seemed routine until I listened to her voicemails. The police quickly ruled her death as a tragic car accident, a single vehicle collision on Via de Cappuccini, just a stone's throw from the Vatican. According to witnesses, she had been driving recklessly fast, as if fleeing from an unseen threat. Yet, the details didn't sit right with me. Sophie was meticulous by nature, always donned her seatbelt, never drove distracted or angry. Accidents weren't in her character. At her small funeral, attended by only close colleagues and friends, Father Benedetti gave a heartfelt eulogy, praising her commitment to preserving historical knowledge. Afterwards, he confided in me something unsettling. Sophie had been working on an unusual project within the Vatican archives, specifically in a restricted sublevel C. She had been tasked with organizing medieval documents, but her final reports referenced materials that supposedly didn't exist. Cartographic documents, in particular, maps that were absent from the official inventory. These revelations unsettled me deeply as I replayed her terrified message from that fateful night. Something Sophie discovered wasn't meant to be seen, and it might have led to her untimely death. The shadows surrounding her accident were far darker than anyone suspected. 3 days after Sophie's funeral, I used my consulting credentials to gain access to the Vatican archives. For years, I had worked as a historical consultant for various Catholic institutions, specializing in medieval manuscripts, especially theological texts from the Crusades era. The Vatican had hired me several times to authenticate documents and provide context, so my credentials allowed me entrance to main archive levels. However, accessing sublevel C, where Sophie had been working, required special permission. I informed the guard I was following up on irregularities noted in Sophie's final reports. After checking, he allowed me through. Sublevel C was older than the levels above, built with stone walls instead of modern materials. The fluorescent lights flickered and hummed, and the air smelled of ancient parchment mixed with a faint organic scent of something long dead. Sophie's workstation was exactly as she had left it. A desk cluttered with manila folders, a computer still logged into the archive database, and a stack of photocopied documents weighted down by a paperweight shaped like St. Peter's Basilica. I settled into a chair and opened the first folder. The documents were medieval maps, but not the kind historians usually study. Maps of kingdoms, trade routes, or coastlines. These were theological maps, diagrams of spiritual realms medieval scholars believed coexisted alongside the physical world. Many were expected. Maps of purgatory inspired by Dante, crude celestial sphere diagrams, artistic representations of the Garden of Eden, typical of a 13th century monastery library. But the last folder held something different. It contained a map drawn on vellum that appeared genuinely ancient, an original from around 1280, not a reproduction. The ink was faded but readable, written in Latin mixed with symbols I couldn't identify. At the top, Someone had labeled it the true map of hell in Latin. Unlike the symbolic or artistic theological maps, this one was detailed and practical, revealing geographic features, elevation markers, paths or roads, and margin notes about temperatures, atmospheric conditions, and travel times between locations. This wasn't an academic exercise. It was a travel guide. I carefully photographed every page of Sophie's notes. Her handwriting was neat and precise, academic in nature. She translated portions of the Arabic text, cross-referenced symbols with other medieval sources, and even tried to construct a timeline for when the maps were created. Yet her final note was different. Written hastily in pen instead of pencil, uneven and rushed. The coordinates aligned with physical locations in Rome. The map was real. I spent the rest of the day poring over Sophie's research in the archive basement. She had been attempting to prove that the medieval map was not mere theological fiction. She had uncovered coordinates embedded in a Latin text, which corresponded to actual places in modern Rome. According to her notes, the map indicated 7 entry points into hell, 7 physical locations where the veil between worlds was thin enough to cross. 6 were marked as sealed or guarded, but the 7th was labeled Open Door. The coordinates for this exposed entry led to a basement under a church I recognized, St. Joseph of the Carpenters, less than 2 miles from where I was sitting. When the archives closed, I left and wandered through Rome under the fading evening light. Tourists bustled around the Pantheon, capturing snapshots and buying souvenirs. Vendors hawked postcards and rosaries. Life seemed ordinary, oblivious to the fact that just beneath the cobblestone streets lay a gateway to hell. St. Joseph of the Carpenters was a modest church squeezed between a restaurant and a souvenir shop, an easily overlooked spot. The front door was locked, and a sign in Italian and English explained the church was closed for renovation. I circled to the back and found a delivery entrance, securing my entry by picking its old lock, a skill I had practiced in college while accessing locked libraries after hours. The church's interior was dim, illuminated only by emergency lights, with scaffolding obscuring the altar and plastic sheets hanging from the ceiling. Although renovation was genuine, it served as perfect cover for someone exploring undisturbed. Behind a door marked "Staff Only" in Italian, stone steps plunged into darkness ancient beyond the church above. Using my phone's flashlight, I counted steps as Sophie had taught me during our childhood cave explorations. At 23 steps down, the basement opened into a chamber whose ancient Roman stone walls predated the church's medieval construction. In the room's center was a well, not for water. The opening was wide, its stones carved with symbols matching those on Sophie's map. Shining my light down, I saw stone steps spiraling into a darkness that seemed to swallow the beam hole. Next to the well stood a modern folding table bearing a laptop and several printed documents. Someone else had been here recently, someone familiar with the map. The laptop was password protected, but its screensaver displayed a photo of Sophie at her Vatican archive desk. It was unquestionably her device, the one she'd used the night she died. I knew Sophie's passwords, variants involving our dog's name, and significant dates from her high school days. It took 4 attempts to log in. Her desktop was impeccably organized. Folders by dates, alphabetically sorted projects, backups. However, a new folder labeled Descent Protocol caught my attention. Inside were detailed plans for a journey, camping gear specifications, temperature data from underground measurements, atmospheric readings, list of supplies including rope, flashlights, water purifiers, emergency flares, medical kits, antibiotics, and bandages. Sophie had been preparing to descend into that very well. Her research filled gaps, revealing historical accounts of others who had used the map to enter hell. Mostly medieval pilgrims, a handful of scholars. One entry from 1634 told of a Jesuit priest who ventured below to retrieve his colleague's soul and returned with detailed observations on hell's geography. Contrary to popular imagination, hell wasn't fire and brimstone, but a tangible realm with terrain, climate, and natural laws. It was dangerous and hostile, but navigable with proper knowledge and preparation. Sophie had done her homework, researched survival techniques for extreme environments, studied deep cave exploration, and even completed wilderness first aid. She had been terrified of horror movies all her life. It was ready to walk into hell itself. I understood then. Sophie was no mere researcher. She was my daughter, inheriting my relentless drive to grasp the unexplainable. Discovering a map that claimed to reveal hell's location, she couldn't just dismiss it. But something had frightened her enough to call me 3 times that night. Something made her drive recklessly through Rome, as though fleeing an unknown pursuer. Her browser history confirmed her growing paranoia. Searches for Vatican security, archive surveillance, and signs of being followed. Her final entry was a voice memo recorded the night she died. "Dad, if you're hearing this, it means I'm dead and you found my research. I'm sorry I didn't tell you what I was working on. I want to be sure before involving you. The map is real. I've confirmed the coordinates, corroborated historical accounts, and even found modern testimonies from those who have descended. Hell is a real place, accessible from Rome, but I think someone in the Vatican knows I've uncovered this. Someone's been watching me, moving my files. I'm scared they'll kill me to keep the secret. If something happens, finish what I started. The supplies are hidden in storage unit 47 at Roma Self-Storage. The keys taped under my desk drawer. Find the truth, Dad, for both of us." Her voice discarded certainty, interrupted by the sound of a car, door slamming, and the engine starting. The timestamp aligned with her fatal accident. I sat alone in that ancient basement, staring into the well, realizing Sophie had been terrified yet determined to embark on a journey into hell. She understood the risks and accepted them because the truth demanded it. I climbed back to the surface and drove to the storage facility. Inside Unit 47 lay everything she'd gathered for her descent. Professional camping gear, weeks' worth of supplies, emergency beacons, waterproof containers, even a Geiger counter for radiation levels. My practical, cautious daughter had been ready to descend alone into hell. That night, past midnight, I parked behind St. Joseph of the Carpenters and brought her after equipping myself with Sophie's meticulously prepared supplies. I returned to the church basement beneath St. Joseph of the Carpenters. The well, ancient and ominous at the center of the room, awaited. According to the medieval map Sophie had found, a spiral of stone steps descended roughly 300 meters into the abyss, leading to what was described as the threshold between our world and hell itself. I secured my climbing harness to a sturdy anchor Sophie had installed and switched on my headlamp, its beam barely penetrating the thick darkness below. The air grew colder as I descended, the stone steps worn smooth by centuries of footsteps and etched with uncanny symbols. I counted steadily, reaching 100, 200 steps, the pressure shifting around me as my ears popped. At the staircase's end, I found myself in a massive cavern, its vast expanse swallowing my light and enveloping me in an eerie silence devoid of even echoes. Consulting Sophie's map carefully, I identified 7 branching tunnels carved into the far wall, each marked by symbols she had painstakingly translated. These were the paths into the circles of hell: wrathful, envious, gluttonous, and others. The path of the wrathful, counterintuitive as it seemed, was considered the safest, a place of open and direct fury rather than deceptive malice or ceaseless hunger. Steeling myself, I ventured into the narrow passage of the wrathful. The temperature rose noticeably, and the air was tinged with a metallic scent. My headlamp illuminated 3 figures ahead, souls trapped here, their forms gray and ragged, no longer completely human. Their eyes, though black, held curiosity rather than malice as they spoke in broken English about their endless torment and how time moved strangely in this place. They told me they had seen Sophie, a living soul who had ventured deeper into the circle of violence, but never returned. I asked them to show me the way, and with a heavy warning about the dangers ahead, they pointed toward a narrow tunnel festooned with symbols of warfare. Beyond, a river of blood marked the boundary of the violent soul's domain, a terrifying, slow-moving flow pulsing with malevolent life. A towering, otherworldly ferryman awaited at its bank, demanding a steep toll, years for my life in exchange for passage across this river. I paid the price, feeling a weight settle deep within me as we crossed into the chaotic cityscape of violence. Here, souls waged eternal battles under the shadow of the Tower of Wrath, locked in endless conflict. Navigating through streets stained by combat, I raced toward the forbidding tower, evading brutal warriors caught in their own ancient grudges. Inside, the spiral ramp climbed past cells of tortured souls until I finally found her, Sophie. Her eyes were almost entirely consumed by darkness, but traces of the daughter I knew still shone through. Her journey had cost her dearly, but I was determined to bring her back from the depths of hell itself. As I ventured deeper into the subterranean realm that Sophie had mapped, I found myself standing in a cavernous chamber dimly lit by my headlamp. The shadows danced on the rough stone walls, revealing 3 figures standing in a loose triangle, their forms humanoid, but clearly altered by centuries in this grim place. Their skin was a weathered gray, stretched taut over brittle bones, and their clothes hung in tatters, remnants of a life long past. They had eyes, solid black orbs that, nonetheless, displayed a flicker of human curiosity rather than the savage hunger I had feared. Approaching cautiously, I spoke in English. The nearest one replied in a rough, accented voice, a man who introduced himself as a Union soldier who had died long ago at the Battle of Antietam. His companions, Marie and Yeppie, shared their own tragic stories, victims of the French Revolution and the plague years in Venice. Time in this place seemed warped. Decades felt like mere moments to them. They told me that souls trapped here retained their reasoning, albeit tinged with their torment, and were not all hostile. Many had been trapped for lifetimes, caught in endless loops of torment or conflict. Remarkably, one of the souls recognized Sophie, a young woman with dark hair, who had passed through only months before, heading deeper into a perilous section known as the Circle of Violence in search of someone. Their accounts revealed a reality far removed from the mythic lakes of fire. Hell here was a physical space with its own geography, governed by rules and harsh conditions, but navigable for those prepared. These souls spoke of the dangers and the persistence of those like Sophie, who came not merely to explore but to seek, to understand, and to save. The weight of their decades-long confinement, their hope for deliverance, settled heavily in the chamber as I prepared to follow the path Sophie had taken, one fraught with peril and uncertainty. The path toward the Circle of Violence was unlike any I had traversed so far. As I followed the narrow tunnel that the soldier had pointed out, the air grew warm and took on a reddish hue, casting an eerie glow that made my headlamp's beam appear almost rose-colored. The walls themselves were engraved with timeless scenes of battle, torture, and warfare. Roman gladiators locked in brutal combat, medieval knights clashing during the Crusades, and modern soldiers wielding rifles and tanks. It felt like walking through a museum dedicated to humanity's endless violence, frozen in an eternal moment. Hours passed as I cautiously navigated the branching paths, relying on Sophie's map and a blessed compass that always pointed back to the surface. The atmosphere thickened, making every breath labored and metallic, reminiscent of the tang of old coins. Then, the distant sound of water reached my ears, leading me to the banks of a surreal river flowing with a slow, dark red liquid blood. The scent was unmistakable and powerful, Across the river stood a sprawling city that defied earthly logic. Its massive medieval architecture rose impossibly high into darkness, with towering spires, bridges arcing over vast chasms, and walls that ebbed and flowed like frozen waves. Flickering lights peppered the windows, and the incessant sounds of combat echoed through the streets. This was the city of violence, the eternal battleground where souls of murderers, tyrants, and warmongers waged endless, fruitless wars. Suddenly, a boat glided toward me from upstream. The ferryman was a spectral figure, humanoid but otherworldly, tall and slender, with skin that gleamed like polished obsidian and robes that seemed to absorb light itself. His voice carried the weight of grinding stone as he demanded payment for passage across the river. Aware of the ancient tales, I offered a year of my life. The ferryman, unfazed, rejected it. Passage would cost 5 years. Desperation pressed in as I considered Sophie trapped somewhere in that city, and I negotiated down to 4 years. No other choice lay before me. Refusal meant drowning in the unholy river, climbing aboard the bone-crafted vessel. A coldness spread through my body, the promise of the debt paid. The blood's current pulsed like a dark heartbeat beneath me as we crossed silently. Upon reaching the other shore, the ferryman warned that the Tower of Wrath housed what I sought, but warned of the violent dead's relentless guardians. They kill because killing is their nature. Passing them requires combat, and the consequences of failure were eternal imprisonment. Stepping into the city's chaotic streets was like stepping onto a battlefield frozen in perpetual violence. Souls fought endlessly with weapons ranging across history's eras, from swords to firearms, with no end and no victory. I moved stealthily among the shadows, inching toward the Tower of Wrath. At its center, black stone spiraled upward, a prison within hell itself. The tortured souls imprisoned within screamed their eternal rage, begging for release or simply a weapon. Ascending the spiral ramp, I found the souls categorized by their violent sins, culminating on the 7th level with Sophie. There she was, trapped and altered, her eyes mostly black but flecks of brown fighting through the darkness. When she saw me, a glimpse of herself shone through before the shadows overtook her again. She confessed to killing Father Toretti, the priest who had pursued her to stop her investigation. Hell had amplified her natural resolve into deadly obsession, and that act had bound her to this realm. Determined to free her, I sought the Guardian of Wrath, the only one with the key to unlock her cell. His throne was forged from weapons used throughout human history, his molten skin glowing with inner fire. The battle was fierce and unrelenting, but instead of rage, I fought fueled by love. My strikes found their mark, and the towering guardian finally fell. With a black iron key in hand, I freed Sophie as the darkness retreated from her eyes. Together, we braved the violent streets once more, prepared to face whatever lay ahead as we sought our path back to the surface. The battle to reclaim Sophie was fierce and unforgiving. When I reached the top of the Tower of Wrath, the Guardian awaited, an imposing figure forged from molten metal, his eyes blazing with fire. He sat upon a throne constructed from weapons spanning the breadth of human conflict, a living testament to the fury he embodied. The father comes for the daughter, he intoned, voice rumbling like an avalanche. His presence was overwhelming, an embodiment of wrath itself. I demanded Sophie's freedom, explaining how she had acted out of desperation to protect crucial knowledge, defending herself from Father Toretti's threats with a desperate act of violence. Her punishment had bound her to this fiery prison, but she was still my daughter. The Guardian rose, wielding a black iron key glowing with oppressive hate, the only key capable of unlocking her cell. Yet he was not without mercy and offered a cruel bargain: single combat. Win, and the key was mine. Lose, and I would join Sophie in eternal captivity. The fight began with swords materializing from thin air. The Guardian's blade, a flaming behemoth, my own an ordinary steel sword, but one that felt righteous in my grip. Although I fought with knowledge and technique, each swing met his hellish skin without effect. He mocked my weak fury. I was fighting with intellect, not rage. But then, fueled by love and a burning, furious determination, I let go of technique. Each blow I struck bore the weight of months of grief and a father's desperate resolve. Black blood leaked from the Guardian's wounds. He faltered, surprised by the intensity of my wrath. Finally, after a brutal exchange, I found my opening. My blade pierced the Guardian's chest, extinguishing the fire in his eyes and cooling his molten form to cold stone. The mighty protector fell. With the key in hand, I hurried back to Sophie's cell. As the lock turned, the darkness in her eyes began to fade, revealing the daughter I remembered, rescued but forever marked by her harrowing ordeal. We escaped the tower in its endless battles, stepping back into the chaotic city. Our battle for redemption was won, but the cost was clear. The path home demanded sacrifices we were only beginning to understand. As Sophie and I emerged from hell's depths, I sensed the heavy toll our journey had exacted. The price for her return was more than just relief. It was a sacrifice that weighed on both our lives. Father Rodriguez had warned us that crossing into that realm demanded payment, and I soon felt its grip. Each step from the bloodstained city back to the surface bore the cost of years stripped away from my own lifespan, a grim bargain for defending the fragile boundary between worlds. Sophie, fragile but alive, was spared from the darkness's full grasp, yet the shadows still clung to us. Her eyes began to clear, but the echoes of hell's influence remained. The debt we paid was not merely a matter of chance or fate. It was carved from a currency of time, years of life exchanged to undo the toll of forbidden knowledge and perilous descent. 4 years for my passage across the river of blood, then another 6 for her release. Each moment spent in that underworld had been collected in cruel increments from our allotted sands of life. What was more harrowing was the realization that the price was ongoing. It extended beyond the moment of escape, etching itself into our bones and whispering through every dawn. We had bargained with death and the dead, trading pieces of ourselves for the sake of discovery, for the hope of redemption. And though we returned to the light, part of us remained tethered to that shadowed place, reminders of the cost that knowledge and courage can demand. 3 days after our return from the harrowing journey into hell, there was a knock on my apartment door. Expecting the police or Vatican security, I was surprised to find a thin man in his 60s, dressed in priestly robes, carrying a worn leather briefcase. His eyes bore the weight of someone who had been grappling with problems far beyond ordinary understanding. He introduced himself as Father Rodriguez from the Vatican Special Archives. "Dr. Harrison," he began, his voice measured but urgent. "We need to talk." Sophie, still pale but growing stronger each day, appeared behind me. "About what?" I asked warily. "About your recent descent and the disappearance of Father Toretti." Father Rodriguez explained. "We had no choice but to invite him in. If the Vatican meant harm, we'd already be lost." His presence suggested something else altogether. Once Sophie was in the kitchen preparing coffee, Father Rodriguez opened his briefcase and laid out a thick manila folder full of documents and photographs. "We know you ventured down," he said softly. "The church has been monitoring the entrance for months." He spread photos on a coffee table. Images of the well, the tunnel entrances, the river of blood, and the tortured city of violence. Someone had been mapping hell using modern surveillance. "How long have you known about all this?" I asked. "For centuries," Father Rodriguez replied. "The church has guarded the entrances, managing what they could, even using them occasionally. But your daughter's research filled gaps in our understanding, knowledge lost since medieval times." Sophie returned with coffee, sitting beside me. She met Father Rodriguez's gaze coolly. "You watched me all along." "Yes," he admitted. "Father Toretti was assigned to monitor you. When you neared sensitive information, he intervened. That he is dead is regrettable, but inevitable when someone resists." Father Rodriguez pulled out personnel files of other Vatican researchers who had studied hellish geography over the last 50 years. Each profile showed a similar trajectory. Initially normal academics, then obsession, erratic behavior, and ultimately disappearance or death. "The maps don't just show the way to hell," he said gravely. "They call the people. The knowledge demands use." "Why tell us this now?" I pressed. "Because you did what no one else has, returned alive and relatively uncorrupted. Your daughter's influence was strong, but she broke free. That indicates a rare resilience. Want to work with us?" Sophie leaned forward. "Work for you? What kind of work?" Father Rodriguez laid out missing persons reports, police files, and clippings. People lost near the entrances. Some accidental, many deliberate explorers like Sophie who became trapped or corrupted. The church needed agents who could descend into hell, retrieve those lost souls, and manage the increasing disruptions, and the souls trapped long-term. I asked, "Those like the soldier, Marie, and Yeppy?" "Much more complicated," Father Rodriguez explained. "The church believes most souls require divine intervention. Removing too many disrupts the balance, often causing more harm. Long-term residents form a harsh ecosystem down there." Sophie considered the weight of his works. "How many have you rescued?" "About 30 in the past 50 years, mostly recent arrivals. Those trapped longer become problematic." Father Rodriguez folded his papers. "This is not a decision to be taken lightly. You are valuable, but also dangerous to yourselves. Some factions want to erase all hellish knowledge and its possessors." He paused. "Cooperating may offer protection. Refusing could mean disappearance." Left alone, Sophie and I debated the offer. The logic was clear. Join forces, help those we could, maybe find ways to ease the trapped soul's plight. Though the sacrifices would be great, it was the path that made sense. The unexpected alliance with Father Rodriguez and the Vatican opened a door neither of us had imagined, a chance to turn hellish darkness into a mission of hope. After Father Rodriguez's visit, Sophie and I found ourselves at a crossroads, grappling with the weight of our discoveries and the grim realities of what lay ahead. The offer to join the Vatican's covert operation came laden with moral complexities far beyond mere academic curiosity. We knew that accepting meant entering a shadowy world where the lines between guardian and prisoner blurred, and the cost of knowledge wasn't just measured in years stolen from our lives, but in the very essence of who we were. Sophie was still pale from her ordeal, yet a newfound resolve glimmered in her eyes. The guilt over Father Toretti's death, once a suffocating presence, was now tempered by purpose, a determination to protect others from the darkness that had claimed her. Together, we weighed the implications of Father Rodriguez's proposal to use our unique knowledge and proven endurance to help those trapped in hell while managing the fragile balance that kept its terrors contained. We debated risks. Every dissent could deepen the influence hell exerted on us, warping our minds and bodies gradually, eroding the line that kept us tethered to the world of the living. Yet, turning away felt like abandoning the souls still trapped below, the same souls Sophie had sought to save with every step of her perilous journey. In the end, our decision was guided by both love and obligation. We would accept the offer, not merely as agents of the Vatican, but as guardians dedicated to navigating the liminal spaces between battlegrounds of damnation and the fragile safety of the surface world. We understood that this path would challenge everything we believed about sacrifice, redemption, and the cost of uncovering inconvenient truths. As Sophie and I prepared ourselves for this new chapter, we acknowledged the uncertain future ahead. But together, we embraced our roles, resolved to walk forward, into the depths with eyes wide open. The quest to secure a lasting peace with the horrors they'd uncovered brought Sophie and me face to face with an ancient Vatican plan known simply as the Final Seal. Deep within the special archives, after months of relentless research through hidden files and forgotten records, we found references to this monumental effort dating back to 1823. The document outlined a daring strategy to permanently close all 7 known entrances to hell, those thin boundaries bridging our world with the abyss below. However, the decision to abandon the project nearly 2 centuries ago was clear. Sealing the gates meant condemning all souls currently trapped in hell to eternal imprisonment, forever cut off from salvation. Back then, knowledge of hell's entrances was limited to a handful. Today, it was spreading rapidly, with Sophie's groundbreaking discoveries only accelerating awareness. Despite the gravity of the consequences, Sophie and I knew we faced a choice. Continue trying to rescue those lost souls, risking further collapse of the barriers, or accept the bitter sacrifice of sealing the gates, ensuring safety for the living at the cost of those already trapped. The moral dilemma was profound. Could we justify condemning so many to eternal torment for the chance to protect countless others? Over several months, we pieced together the Final Seal's complex requirements. It demanded simultaneous rituals at all 7 entrances, utilizing relics amassed across centuries, and most crucially, it required unwavering guardianship. 7 individuals, 1 at each site, dedicated for life to maintaining the seals and preventing the realm from spilling into ours. Without hesitation, Sophie and I volunteered to stand watch over the Rome entrance. After careful consultation with Father Rodriguez and his superiors, our offer was accepted, along with a solemn warning. Our new role was permanent. Once the seals were activated, leaving was no longer an option. The spells depended on our constant presence and vigilance. On a cold Tuesday in November, the final ceremony took place in the basement of St. Joseph of the Carpenters. Surrounded by artifacts that resembled intricate medieval compasses, we spoke ancient Latin phrases that made the air ripple and shimmer. Darkness pooled at the bottom of the well, transformed, solidifying into a barrier impenetrable by mortal means. I was sealed. Since that day, 6 months have passed as Sophie and I have adapted to our new lives as guardians. The church equipped our quarters with modest comforts: electricity, internet, a small kitchen, and a space for rest. We maintain the seal through daily rituals and nightly watches, filing regular reports to Father Rodriguez. Our days are quiet, filled with reading, chess, and careful conversations about history and the strange world beneath us. Sometimes, my thoughts drift to the souls we left behind, the soldier yearning to learn if his war had ended, Marie, and Yeppy, forever trapped beyond salvation. Yet, I find solace knowing our vigilance protects the countless innocents above, unaware of the damnation lying just beneath their feet. Our journey led us to unimaginable truths about hell and duty, but accepting that burden, Sophie and I established a legacy, not through fame or discovery, but through sacrifice and the unyielding resolve to hold back darkness for generations to come. And in that we find purpose. Months have passed since Sophie and I took up our roles as guardians of the entrance to hell beneath St. Joseph of the Carpenters. Our new life is one of quiet vigilance, marked by routines that blend the weight of responsibility with moments of ordinary humanity. The Vatican ensured the basement was outfitted with modern comforts: electricity, internet access, a small kitchen, and modest sleeping quarters, turning what might have felt like imprisonment into a purposeful existence. Each day we inspect the seal's integrity, ensuring the darkness that once threatened the world remains contained. Evenings are spent filing detailed reports to Father Rodriguez, maintaining the connection with those on the surface who depend on our vigilance. We keep shifts at night to guarantee constant watchfulness, our bond strengthened by the shared understanding of this duty. Beyond the practical, Sophie and I find solace in the simple pleasures within these walls. We read ancient texts and discuss history and theology, sometimes losing ourselves in games of chess that remind us of normal life. The occasional visit from Father Rodriguez or other Vatican researchers brings fresh insights into the mysteries we guard, underscoring the broader significance of our work. Though the shadows of those trapped in hell linger in our thoughts, the soldier longing for peace, Marie and Yeppie confined to eternal waiting, we draw comfort from the knowledge that countless lives, both in Rome and beyond, are safer because of our sacrifice. We are the custodians of a threshold few could comprehend, bearing the burden so others never stumble into darkness. Our journey, born from loss and desperate search, has led us to this profound purpose. Sophie often says this is legacy enough for any lifetime, and I find myself in wholehearted agreement. In guarding the gates of hell, we found a calling greater than ourselves, one that will protect generations to come. The weight of our choices pressed heavily on us as Sophie and I reflected on the souls we could not save. The soldier from long ago, Marie, Yeppie, each one trapped by circumstances beyond their control, destined to remain in that eternal realm. Despite the pain, we found a fragile peace in our roles as guardians. We understood that our sacrifice was profound, yet necessary to shield countless innocents from the perils lurking beneath Rome's surface. Our new purpose demanded unwavering vigilance in acceptance of the life we now led, a life burdened by responsibility but enriched by meaning. In guarding the sealed entrance, we became more than just survivors. We became protectors of a delicate balance. The legacy we forged was one of quiet sacrifice, a testament to love's power in the face of darkness, and the hope that even in hell, there can be redemption for those left behind. Through profound loss and undeniable sacrifice, the father and daughter confront the unfathomable truths hidden beneath Rome. Their perilous journey to hell and back not only rescues trapped souls, but also unveils chilling secrets within the Vatican. Embracing their new roles as guardians of the eternal seal, they forge a legacy built on courage and responsibility. Protectors ensuring that the horrors of hell remain contained, safeguarding countless lives above. In the midst of darkness, they find renewed purpose and peace, proving that even in the depths, hope endures. If you found this story intriguing, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more captivating journeys.